Buongiorno. Buongiorno e buon pomeriggio a tutti. Eccoci dunque.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the opening event at the meeting 2014. We will speak about the power of the heart and the search for truth. We are here to speak of that with very distinguished guests. I will soon give the floor to Emilia Guarnieri, who is the president of the Fondazione Meeting per l'Amicizia dei Popoli, and Father Pier Battista Pizzaballa, who is the guardian of the Holy Land, who is here to bear witness of this.
Una testimonianza e una presenza.
He is a very distinguished person, and the fact that you have come here so numerous confirms this. We are at a very special moment in history. It's a very difficult one. I'm sure that there will be a real point of reference to cast a glance on the possible journey through this very difficult world. So we are here to speak about today, and for that I give the floor to Emilia Guarnieri without further ado, who is going to welcome you by reading the message of the President of the Republic of Italy. Good afternoon. Allow me to read the message sent by President Napolitano. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome all the participants in the 35th meeting 2014. The heading of this edition, "To the Ends of the World and of Existence," is a burning issue. The terrible events in Iraq and Syria, the problems in Gaza Strip because of the conflict between Palestinians and Israel, Libya, Ukraine, and the tension in the relationship with Russia, the clashes appearing everywhere in the world, and the mass migrations are the most painful signs of the complexity and the fragility of the international scene. The silent drama of those who have their rights neglected, those who have lost hope, and those who live in poverty are a confirmation of this. These people find it difficult to build a future for themselves and their families. The peripheries, the ends of the world, are not far away. They are part of our world, of our experience. There are tragedies happening every day in many parts of the world concerns us all. They should not be neglected. They should be a stimulus to our conscience, to draw our attention, and they should involve our emotions. They should be a warning and an indication to act, to guarantee more cohesion to the international community, to consolidate the European Union, which should be a bulwark of democracy, freedom and justice. The human dimension of the tragedies of today's world. Human beings are not alone. They are part of a reality where the interaction with other people and the respect of diversity should be a source of inspiration and to overcome lethal contrasts. In this spirit, I'm sure that during your proceedings, you have the opportunity to offer far-sighted ideas. So I wish all success to the proceedings of the meeting, which I will follow with great attention. Signed by the President Giorgio Napolitano.
Mando da qui il nostro
I would like to thank the President for this attention, the closeness that the President demonstrates to the Friends of Meeting. The message that we have just heard is the best way to open up the discussion on the subjects we will be dealing with this year. I'd like to start my speech by quoting a sentence that you might remember: very lively tension to life, passionate love to the mystery of mankind, a passionate love to the design of human beings. These are the words by Don Giussani when connected in a video conference in 2004, and that was his farewell to the Friends of Meeting. The way he described the experience of his days: passionate warmth, passionate affection for what human beings can do for their history. This warmth and this affection for human beings and its activities in history are the ideas that have always supported the meeting. I recalled the words by Don Giussani when preparing this event. And I realized that this love for human beings is part of my and your experience. So I was reminded of the sentences by Don Giussani. That's why I repeat them in front of you. And it's this love and this passion who have always supported what we do. In particular, with the title of this year, this warm passion should be able to widen its horizons, reaching the ends and the peripheries of the world. We are here to confirm the second part of the heading. We are not alone. Human beings are not left alone in their adventure. This week is a great opportunity to meet the ends, to meet the peripheries, and to join company with other human beings. We have started with the words, the power of heart, to confirm that there is something which is certain and hence powerful. That is something which can modify reality. That's why we have selected this title and identify the subject of that power, i.e. the heart. The heart is the need for freedom, is the ability to recognize what is true and what is beautiful. The heart is the infinite. It is the heart today which is a very important factor of human nature, is the one which is most threatened. Today is the soul of human beings which is off board. And Kudakov, underground poet at the time of Stalin, stated that it is the soul of man which is off board. So we need to bring the hearts back on board with its affections and desires. This does not simply mean going back to good feelings or to very easy discussions that makes us feel stronger because we are against people who have different thoughts. The heart is something which joins human beings. It's not something which divides. We share the willingness to achieve truth and good. That's why the meeting has always been able to welcome different human beings and people. The passion for the mystery of man, as Don Giussani said, is love for what a man can do for his history and for what human beings can do in history. We love what human beings do. We know that what a human being does can change the conditions and the existence of our brothers and sisters. That's why we look with great interest to those who work in politics, to the entrepreneurs, to the investors, to workers, to legislators. We are here in the hope to meet human beings who believe that a change is possible, and in particular human beings who are able to go beyond differences to state the common good. But the fight, the adventure of life is harsh. Indeed, we have an enemy to face. I don't know whether the term enemy is the right one, but I don't have a better one to offer. The enemy has two faces. One is more subtle and the second is more tragically overt. The first was pointed at by Don Carron in April the 9th when speaking on Europe, stating that the critical point of the contemporary culture is in the short-sightedness used to look at the deep needs of human beings, not being able to understand the needs, the basic needs of human beings. That culture proposes to multiply to the infinite partial responses. The tragedy today is the fact that there are false promises and delusions which are allowed by this attitude. Allow me to add that the final outcome of that, the fact that we only concentrate on partial answers, is there is no certainties which can be considered as a common starting point. So we don't no longer share a common idea about what is good, just. And this is our condition. There is a second face of the needle, a second face of the enemy, i.e. evil, violence, abuse of power. Human beings are able to be evil. In these weeks, we have seen terrible images broadcast which confirm that the evil exists with a terrible ferocity. So the mystery of evil does exist. But we have to take a stance. We have to pick up our own responsibilities. We have to make decisions. That passionate affection and the passionate warmth for human beings by Don Giussani, what is it? Is it an over-sentimental feeling, which we indeed can preserve, like that of blurred virgins or bent back human beings? This passionate affection for human beings has its own standing in front of the challenges of the history. There is an ultimate point. Is there the possibility to state the evidence of what is true and good? Benedict XVI had stated that the freedom of human beings is always new and continuous decisions are necessary. Freedom presupposes that in the fundamental decisions for every man, every generation has a new start. The heart is powerful because it is free. Every new start is possible only for those people who crave for this freedom. And it is this freedom that we have seen in the journey of the Pope in the Holy Land, or the prayer in the Vatican gardens, the idea of free men offered by Father Pizzaballa. These human beings have expressed the desire to pray together. The Pope said that he was requested to pray with the others. The Pope acknowledges that peace is a gift which we deserve because of our work, but still is a gift. And that encounter, according to the Pope, is a key step of human attitudes. The smoke of bombs is hiding the door, but the door is still open. And that attitude, according to the Pope, is that of prayer or a religious belief in the prayers of a Muslim, a Jew, or a Christian. It doesn't matter. We all walk through history to search for truth and what is good. This religious position, the experience of Christians, is there to be looked at because it can offer an experience and a witness. That's why we are very grateful to Father Pizzaballa, because he is the evidence, the symbol of experience and witness. Christians are not afraid of getting decentralized, stated Pope Francis in the message sent earlier this morning. They are not afraid to go towards the peripheries because they have Jesus Christ at their center. We are freed by fear because of Jesus Christ, and we are happy because the good news is that he is with us. And that's why we are sure that we can trust in the uncontainable freedom of human beings, their ability to advocate good for themselves and for the others. And it's this certainty that makes the passion for human beings and the passionate affection and worth something which is realistic and reasonable still today, even though we are confronted with terrible challenges.
L'esperienza dei cristiani dunque che
So the experience of Christians is the beginning of this week, starting from today. On the last day, we'll be speaking again the persecutions of Christians in certain parts of the world. So I'm sure we will be able to understand the scope of challenges which could not even be imagined in the past. Let me make a step backward. When I was invited, I realized that we had decided to start from freedom. There it is. Look at this.
questo viaggio
the journey of the Pope through history with freedom, that is the starting point of this edition of the meeting. But history had not come to an end there. We also have destruction, bombs, wars, Christians, Muslims, minorities escaping, and again bombs, and again weapons. There has been sort of a speeding up of events in history. It is as if what we knew was there had decided to take hold of the scene, forcing us to have a different perspective. There are people who have gone through that history directly. That's why we are very happy to have Father Pizzaballa here. You have the floor. Thank you very much. Shall endeavour to remain within the time limits have been allowed. There are many subjects in our discussion concerning the Middle East, the search for truth, and so on. Well, it's difficult to get started. This is pretty difficult because it's very difficult to talk about such a complex subject in a limited time. and a place on the earth which is radically changing. Still, it's even more difficult to relate that with the issue of the power of the heart, which is the subject of this meeting. So what can the heart do when confronted with these humanitarian tragedies that we see in the mass media? A few words are not enough. I think it would be a mistake to confine ourselves to simply analyze the politics, the social issues, and the history. We need to take a different position to interpret things through religions without overwhelming us. I mean, the two sides are necessary. We need to have experts helping us to understand the radical changes which are happening in politics, economics, and in the society. But we need to have a higher view without fears and complexes. In the past months in Jerusalem, we received many demands and proposals from many different international associations and movements. They are lay associations. They are very much concerned, and they would like to involve us in many different initiatives in the media, in culture and politics, and we also want us to be sort of military advisors to save Christianity and its culture in the Middle East and elsewhere. Well, this is right, but unfortunately, what is missing there is the glance of faith, not only of those who trust their ability to work on the field, but also those who trust and entrust their lives to another, with a capital A. That means working, praying, listening to any suggestion of the heart, so that the passionate and free search for truth identifies unknown or unexpected roads, so that we are ready to be directly and personally involved with the others and for others. I've not come here to talk about the facts. You can read that in the media. I would like to offer you my personal thoughts, and I'd like to try and share with you my position. The Middle East is now again catching the headlines more than in the past. And many are concerned of that. Egypt, Israel, Palestine, Libya, Syria, and Iraq are undergoing a very radical change. The future is not clear. There was a sort of stability which, for about 40 years, had characterized the relationship or non-relationship with those countries has come to an end. And new balances are being created, which are a source of concern for the many, in particular for the minorities, both Christians and not Christian. The Middle East of the 20th century, which was born after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, colonialism, and the birth of nation-states, is over. There is a new era, but still we are not able where we are going to end up. The Arab Spring was the source of a lot of enthusiasm in the past, because people were able to turn down dictators. At last, the people and the young persons become protagonists of their lives. Everybody was happy of that. But that process was, in a way, seized by the hands of religious movements and parties who completely changed the nature of the Arab Spring. That turned out to be a clash of powers among different religious and social components of the Middle East, in particular sides and Sunnis. Fight for power, which indeed implies many different political, economic, energy interests, but we are not here to analyze them. well, that was a form of involution as compared with the initial Arab Spring, is the persecutions for Christians and other religious minorities, and the strengthening of Muslim parties. Some of them are extremists. To understand the nature of the relationship among the different religious communities in the Middle East, we should start from their social and historical background. I'm not here to lecture you about history, but just to set the scene. More than in Europe, the Middle East has always been a melting pot of different religions. Hebraism, Christianity, Islam have their hearts and roots in the Middle East. Each of these faiths had divisions and developments, Sunni, Shiites, Orthodox, Christians, Copts, Syrians. Well, many communities were born through the centuries. And the Middle East is a place of living together, which is pretty unique in the world. We heard about the Yazidis, the Shiites, and we all thought that Muslims are a single people. On the contrary, the Middle East is a place where all these different groups live together. Indeed, living together had not always been easy with persecutions through centuries, but we never had this sort of religious cleansing as we have today. Middle East is a place where people live together. That might seem unbelievable if we hear the news, but it used to be like that, more than in many other places. Italy is a country where we have many dialects with people of different denominations. But this is the way we have to get what is best from them, and they want to offer the best of them. If you meet an Armenian, a Copt, and so on in the Middle East, everybody remains themselves because they indeed meet daily because they live together the same problem. And they do that through their own faith, traditions, visions, and so on. They share common difficulties of the daily living. So that would not be the case if that had happened in the West. The belonging to a different religion in the Middle East means belonging to different parts of the society and cultures. So faith is a way to define an identity of the person in the society. Religion is important to determine the structure, the history. We rarely identify elements of laicity as we conceive it in the West, where the state and the church are two different things. In the Middle East, religion permeates all the lives of people in their daily activities. So every person, every group, every religious group have their own habits, customs, uses, symbols, meeting places, and so on. They use certain names, the attire in a certain way. They have their own symbols. So every person at birth receives a number of identities which is defined to the faith in which they believe. We would consider that a fundamental violation of fundamental rights in the West. So the religious dimension is part of the civil identity. Every person is defined a Christian, a Jew, a Muslim, regardless of the fact that they practice actively. There are some aspects of the public life, such as marriage, which are done only through religious priests. So belonging to a certain religion, besides telling a person who they are, define people in relation to the others. So our religious experience, the social experience, is the way we define the relations with others, personally and socially. Two inhabitants of Jerusalem, though being the same city, if they have two different faiths, they will approach common problems in two completely different ways. They will have completely different social models. One can be an atheist, but still they remain Muslim or Christian. This living together among different religions is far away from being integration. We will never have integration in the Middle East. So this living together is something which characterized the Middle East for centuries, and that never been simple and linear. That is a part of that society. That's why the Christians of different denomination, Muslims, Yazidi, Kurds, Alawites, Druzians, Sunnis on sides, well, these are key components which are still present in the Middle East. They have not disappeared. That means that to date, they had the opportunity to live together in the Middle East. So the main concern is the fear of having radical movements seizing the power in Syria and Iraq. The pictures we see today are terrible, in particular the caliphate, which is targeting not only non-Muslim minorities, but the very Muslims who do not share their doctrine.
It's not only an anti-Christian persecution, but a persecution against all those that are different from them, something that goes against the spirit and the tradition and the history of the Middle East. The questions and these movements are at the center of the worries of entire religious communities in the whole Middle East. In the Christian communities, there is increasing tension. Guarantees seem to be lost, and the temptation is that of going away. In some cases, this was a need, as we saw in Iraq. What was done in Nineveh's plain in Iraq to the Christians and others is a source of shame. The so-called Islamic State uses the police in a certain way, but this goes against the history and the character of the Middle East, and we can't avoid considering this. It's necessary that all religious communities raise their voice against this. The Islamic world started to react at last, and it's nice to see among us also Muslims. This is important, but honestly, we have to say that this world was a bit shy in showing this. The Arab media did not exaggerate in reporting certain declarations. There has to be a strong expression against what is happening, and this is required by the severity of what is happening everywhere. We need to continue living together and talking to each other. This fanaticism has to be stopped, even with force, if necessary. But the use of force without the idea of reconstructing at all levels, politically, religiously, and economically, will not end up in anything. The firm force destroys. You have to reconstruct the void created by the use of force. Otherwise, we will have even more extremism, because there will always be someone more pure and more just than one is. There will always be someone who is more pure and more just than you are. So force is not, the use of force is not the perspective. The use of force sometimes may be necessary to stop an even bigger evil. This is also true for the old Israel-Palestinian conflict. I don't want to talk about this very much because honestly I don't know what to say on it. Everything has been said so far. The force, without any perspective of social, economic and political reconstruction, will lead to no other solution than returning to the use of other force in a sort of vicious circle. How can you speak of peace if in one's heart you only have hatred, pain and revenge because of the violence that was made on people? There is no family that has not known of this violence. Force is never the road to go. It may open a road, but never reconstruct anything. The Middle East, starting from the Holy Land, from Israel and Palestine, urgently and dramatically needs to identify a new road for the future, which can only be built together with all the different souls which make up those areas. Christians, Muslims, Kurds, Jews, and all the other religious and ethnic communities form part of the life of these countries and will not disappear. Thinking that they will disappear is a pure illusion, and ignoring the existence of all these communities means being blind. Alongside the betrayal of the historical cohabitation of different religious communities, which has taken place in some Iraqi cities occupied by the fundamentalists, there are also forms of solidarity which have to be reported. In a recent visit of a few weeks ago in Syria, in the city of Aleppo, I saw that it is possible that people who don't know each other share common needs and emergencies. Just an example, the city of Aleppo has for many months been without water, and the only solution is private wells. Not everybody can have a private well, of course, and also electricity lacks because they don't have energy more than 2 hours a day. You can't actually get water if you don't have a generator. And also diesel oil for generators are difficult to find because it is very expensive. And a standard family cannot live like this. This is impossible for the entire population, which is built up by poor people who don't know where to go. It's the main institutions that have a well, for example, the mosques, the churches, the hospitals. I personally saw Christians and Muslims queuing up in a church to have water, and I saw Christians bringing water to their Muslim neighbors and vice versa. I saw Muslims going to the church to get water for their neighbors who were old and living on high floors. In a convent, the Terra Santa College in Aleppo, there is no generator, but because actually they forgot that the generator needs diesel oil. But the Muslim neighbors have a generator. The other neighbors are all Muslim, and they collect money for the diesel oil. The neighbor that has a generator keeps the generator, and the priests take water for the whole neighborhood. That's just a simple example of how the friars have established relations with their neighbors. This was not a requirement before. Jesuits, with their Jesuit relief service, provide an exceptional service. They use a facility which was abandoned by the Franciscan nuns of Aleppo and organized a kitchen for entire neighborhoods. More than 10,000 meals leave that convent every day for everybody. And the food comes from Islamic organizations. The sisters take care of the organizations the way they can do, and volunteers, both Christians and Muslims, carry food to those in need on a daily basis. Moving around in town is a dangerous act, and nobody knows whether they can go back home once they leave home. But everyone is ready to take this risk in order to do something for the others. During my stay in Aleppo, our neighbors, the cathedral and the see of the bishop, were hit twice by the rebels and by the army respectively. In both cases, I saw that everybody tried to do their best in order to help, support and encourage the others. They simply gave support. There's very little to do in some cases, but you can at least support people in their drama. I could go on with the witnesses, but I think I gave you a good idea of what is happening there. The Middle East is in flames. The old forms of cohabitation seem to no longer exist. I don't know what the situation will look like in 5 years' time. I don't think you know either. We see contradicting and ununderstandable phenomena. There's betrayal of old friendships, but also formation of new friendships, a refusal of the others and a search for the others. Alongside the heart of those who betrayed, there is the heart of those who loved. Gestures of many anonymous people are present everywhere. They are the secret force which is necessary to go beyond, not to stop in front of the devil's power. The neighbor that supports you, that with a gesture of friendship in the face of so much death, allows you to breathe and believe that it is still possible to continue to stay there and live together. I don't deny that there are dramatic problems there, that there are betrayals and cruelties which actually raise many questions in everybody's conscience, asking one to take a firm position against all this. I don't think we have to stop at this. It's necessary to have a perspective in mind, which is reconstruction and life for the future. It's not enough to say that things are not going in the right direction. We have to show the right way to go. The evil which questions us as Christians wants us to be even more Christian. It's in these circumstances that we actually live our Christian vocation in a complete way, without running away and without fearing. We shouldn't, as Christians, be afraid of evil. We have to be calm, and we have to be fully aware of the fact that nothing can interfere with God's will. We hear people say we are almost at the end of everything, but this is not true. The old models maybe have come to an end, but not the world and not us. We often hear words of discomfort and resiliation among us and also religious people. We hear about a clash of civilizations and a sort of call to the arms to defend ourselves, but this has nothing to do with the Christian faith. We tend to forget that Christianity comes from the cross and cannot do without it. Jesus becomes the King of the world on the cross, not after multiplying bread. Christianity arises from a human failure, from a defeat, from a broken heart, which is the heart of Christ on the cross. This is where Christianity comes from. The King of the world is there. As Christians, we have to keep this in mind. When we talk about the power of the heart, we have to look at that heart, which is a measure of God's love and also our love. Our acting as Christians must have that heart as a reference. We often forget this, and we fall into the temptation to believe that it's our feet that are going to save us. To a Christian, an analysis of reality, any reality, is not complete unless it refers to Christ. You don't understand the truth of an event unless you refer it to Christ. Therefore, not to an ideology, but a person, which becomes a measure and a model of one's own acting and thinking. I'm thinking of the episode of Mark 4, the boat with the disciples, which drifts among the waves, and the disciples panicking and Jesus reproaching them. This is what Jesus reproaches to us when we panic. Why are you so afraid? Are you so fearful? Haven't you got any faith? This is something which is still said to us today, and it's also said in the Middle East. The different Western and international strategies, I don't know whether they are helping us or they're helping them. Perhaps we have to urgently look for a political solution, but it's not these strategies that are going to save Christianity in the Middle East. Peter's boat will always be drifting. There will always be someone inside this boat to say what should be done, but it's the Lord that can bring the storm to a halt. Our presence will be saved by the small ones, those who with courage run a risk and defy death by loving their brothers gratuitously. The images, the pictures of the Middle East that we see all the time leave us really with a sense of great oppression. It's legitimate to ask ourselves what we can do, and it's also necessary to engage ourselves so that we put an end to this strategy, which is to this tragedy, which is a tragedy for us all. Our actions have to be accompanied by the deep conviction that our actions, to be fruitful, have to be combined with Christ's actions. Let me conclude with two more images linked to the Middle East of some months ago, even if they seem to be far away. The first one is the meeting between the Patriarch Bartholomeus and Pope Francis in Jerusalem at the Basilica, which holds memory of the death and resurrection of Christ. That basilica, for the first time in its history, saw the encounter of two realities, the Orthodox and the Catholic reality, which were enemies for many centuries. Athanagora and Pope Paul VI met, but it was a liturgical act prepared by the two churches there at the heart of the divisions. Certainly the divisions are still there, and now after that encounter everything seems to be back as before. But it's not as before, even if we wanted it to be as before. Those signs are powerful ones, and mark a commitment for those that were there. The two churches committed themselves to establish a relationship which is different and more positive. The road to go is still a long one, but it has started in a way, and it started there in the Middle East. The second picture that I would like to refer to is the prayer wanted by Pope Francis and Patriarch Bartholomeus in the Vatican. The presidents of the two countries have always been hostile, Israel and Palestine. The two presidents are not so powerful, politically speaking, and the Pope is even less powerful. He can give indications but cannot intervene in that old conflict. And soon after that there was big violence between the two parties. But also in this case the road was marked. If we look at the Middle East, we see pictures of death, bombings, missiles, etc. But above all, we see hatred, deep hatred, which is fed by and fueled by all this violence. Hatred makes people blind, prevents you from seeing the others. Instead, you have no alternative because the others will always stay there and you have to find a way to talk to them. But we have to remember the two presidents praying together and the Patriarch and the Pope praying together. This helps us think of new ways. There are actually new ways to go, and this is also the Middle East. We need everything in the Middle East: financial help, military help, political help, mediation, support. But to conclude, we above all need to believe that we can still love each other. Testimonies and witnesses show that thanks to the small ones of the gospel, we still have this strength, and this is going to be the strength for the Middle East. Thank you very much.
Sì, un lungo applauso e un grazie.
Well, you really deserved this long applause, and thank you very much for accepting to make a journey from Jerusalem to here, and you will be leaving soon. Hearing these words helpful to change our perspectives and the course of things, because we can do little things which can change the future. Indeed, it's unique to have the opportunity to attend a meeting with such an inspired title. Well, we are not here only to speak of words. There is a road, there are persons, there are faces. When Father Pizzaballa said that human beings have not come to an end, is telling us the story of the heart. He spoke about heroes who are neglected by history, but we are helpful to understand what is the road to follow. As we have a few minutes to spend together, and I hope I can interpret your thinking. Well, when you speak about these little examples, we are reminded that every person means a history, a family, a story, interrupted customs and uses, as it happens during the war. So what can we, or what do you tell these people who would be tempted to go away when they can do that? So for many, because of poverty, it's really impossible to escape. So what will you tell them? Well, yes, we should be very practical and realistic. Escaping from the war would be the best and easiest thing, but this is not possible to everyone. For the many in Syria as well as Iraq, they just gather in the refugees or displaced people camps. So we tell them that the strength of living is worth living. When we have children there, well, people say, well, I would go, but I stay here because of the children. This is the force of love. So this is something which keeps you in the place where you live. We have to be practical, so the many solidarity initiatives are a form of giving new breath to these people. Indeed, they need not only to eat, but they need a house and a job. So all these solidarity actions are a very concrete help and giving evidence that we are there to support and encourage them. There's not very much to be said. We can offer examples. In the village of Nile in northern Syria, in the area of Oronte, on the border of Syria, with the groups of rebels unleashed, there are only poor people, elderly persons and families with children, but the parish is still there. So people said, if the Minister of Faith is still here, we will stay here. So if you see a person remaining there, many say, well, you stay there, we stay together, we don't go away. So this is a strength, a force which you cannot describe by words, but it's life, and life is something which goes through witnesses, passions, life. So this is what we try to do, and this, I think, is the way out. You're rightly so, and you really deserve this applause. So bearing a witness is really important. He said, in a recent visit in Aleppo, with the same tone as if he had gone to Riccione. So Aleppo is destroyed because of the bombings, and large neighborhoods of the city are in the hands of unleashed rebels. You know where Mr. James Foley was kidnapped and beheaded. Father Pizzaballa made a recent visit in Aleppo. There, he visited Aleppo. So I have another question. You feel the need to be there. And do you think they need to meet you? Yes, of course. Aleppo can no longer be recognized. It usually takes 2 hours from Al-Attaqi. It took 12 hours through bypass roads, checkpoints, and so on. So the periphery cannot be recognized, is nearly completely shattered. No water, no electricity. It's a tragedy. But while getting there, and I was a bit presumptuous, I thought I was going there bringing something. As a matter of fact, people were happy, but I got back stronger. because they were curious, asking me, how could you manage? How have you got the permits? That was more important than the aids, because human beings need heart, not only bread. So we stayed together. What are we supposed to do? So having someone else coming from outside, it's something. It's a form of additional warmth. They are very passionate. They have a lot of determination. You know, even though going in the roads is dangerous, the churches and the mosques are overcrowded. So there is a lot of solidarity out there. And when I came back, as I told you, well, I am even more encouraged. I'm stronger because life is what always prevails. There is something we hear a lot about the persecution of Christians. It has turned into a sort of slogan. It is as if we stop or refuse of thinking what's the gist of the problem. So how can we continue to understand and tell what's happening every day, and what is the role of faith? Those who are prosecuted indeed are the last to tell that they are persecuted. They simply consider themselves as people in a war. Narration is made by those who are outside. Those who are inside don't even have the time to think of that. They think of the daily things of their families and so on. They are concentrated on different issues. As you rightly said, stop using slogans. Indeed, there are acts of persecutions of Christians, but also of other religious groups. The number of Muslims killed is much higher than that of Christians. The number of mosques destroyed is much higher than that of destroyed churches. So don't become instrumental to ancient clashes between civilizations. So we should look for the human being in all circumstances, in all realities, and work with human beings. When you meet a human being, you meet God, and vice versa. If you love God, you also are able to encounter human beings. Those who are there maybe are not in the right perspective to think of that. Maybe this is what they do in the daily life without thinking of that. A very last thing. The big question of these days. So what are we supposed to do? What can we do? What should be our attitude? Well, in terms of faith, you said that. What are we supposed to do as a community, watching from outside? And only stupid people think that this is part of another world. Well, what's happening there concerns us all, not only because there are human beings in danger, but also we have links with their culture and we are nearby. So what to do is a big question. It's difficult to offer a precise answer. We have no magic wands. We should involve international communities and organizations to play their role, not only in terms of diplomacy, but also very practically from a political and civil viewpoint. As I told you, There is no single solution which we can find in isolation. They should talk to each other. We cannot talk to ICIS, and well, we should talk to the others. We should find a way where all the key actors are involved, nobody excluded. Indeed, Israeli, Palestinian, Sunni sides would not manage to do that alone. The international community should find a way to, in a way, impose the starting of a relationship to identify common political, economic, religious, and social solutions. These countries need development. So fundamentalism, extremism is born in extreme poverty, injustice in the society. So what they need is to be offered a perspective, and the international community has to play a role, which is not sending weapons, which is helping these countries to develop. In other words, well, this, besides of religion, in order to give a practical answer, this is a mandatory solution that we have to find. I'm reminded of the initial pictures, the ones of Pope Francis going through the different historical places in Israel and Palestine with the two walls. And the worst time of persecutions, I still don't know what will happen in the future. This appears to be the worst moment in the history of persecutions because of the caliphate. He says, I'll send my nuncio there and might go there myself. It is as if he had understood, even before others, that only something completely different could change the balance or the imbalances. I was very much impressed during that visit, which is indeed was a complex one, which was carefully tailored. I mean, the Pope, was not all interested. He couldn't care less, and he did what he wanted. The councillor said, well, Your Holiness, you have to do this. And he said, no, I won't do that. They hadn't expected him to stop at the wall or honor to the victims. So there was a program, there was an agenda, and he managed that very freely. That could be a key to read things. You should help us. We are a bit slave of our schemes and patterns and our scores. Someone coming here and telling, turn the page, look forward. That's important.
E con questo
Well, that concludes our meeting. Thank you very much for this changing. Thank you very much for coming, and you are rushing to go back to those suffering lands. And I think this is a good beginning for the meeting 2014. And we'll be closing the meeting on the issue of Christianity. I don't want Father Pizzaballa to miss his flight, but allow me to say that through his words, we have seen that being true is possible. And to defend truth is possible. So what is true, what is good is evident. So through his words, through his narration, we experienced that. So what I advocate to us all, as indeed we'll be speaking of many tragedies, So pay attention to the reality, as the Pope said. I think that this can be the key this week. We'll be meeting many different people. We'll hear about the present and the past through the exhibitions. So meeting all these different realities should be part a challenge so that we can be provoked to be real human beings, to be true, so that when we go home at the end of the week, we could have tested and experienced that it's possible to be true. And truth is available to everyone. Passion is available. Dedication to the truth in ourselves is possible for everyone. The more truth we'll encounter, the more we'll be spurred and challenged to grasp this opportunity. As the Pope said, when quoting Giussani, reality is always a provocation. So all of the realities we'll see will have to become a provocation and a challenge to grasp truth in ourselves, which is not a feeling. It's an opportunity to understand things, to intervene, to discover the relationship that we have with our hearts. So I wish to you all and to myself to get a better understanding of the truth which is in ourselves. Thank you very much for the Pizzaballa, and good night, everybody.